Good morning, good afternoon, hello everybody. Sorry for the poor video quality, it is what it is. Jack's always busy. So we're going to have a look at Unit 4, Recounts, on page 105. So we're going to move on to a new chapter because it's a new month. The month of Christmas. The month of, well, in the West, the Christmas is all about the end of the year, the end of the seasons. It's the tide of destruction. It's the end of all things, to burn away the past and to create a better future. At least that's the nonsense that I read about in school. So, Recounts, page 105. Those of you that have the book, those of you who are awake, those of you who are mentally in attendance. Anyway, moving on. Recounts. By the end of this unit, you should be able to listen for sequence. You should be able to do that now, to be absolutely fair. I know not everyone can, most of you. Read and understand factual recounts, a personal recount, and an extract from a biography. Wow. Use grammatical features. Not much grammar in the book, probably not enough. We've got exams coming up, and I don't feel like we've covered anything grammatically interesting. Describe events. You should be able to do that, although the last 2 years none of you have had any events. Give an oral recount. We might do that. We might actually do that. We could do that on YouTube, share videos of an oral recount. Generate possibilities. How can you generate possibilities? That's just life. Walk through life, you generate possibilities. Establish criteria and make decisions. Write recounts. Presumably, that relies on something having happened to you. So, an overview. Factual recounts tell readers about what has happened in the past. They give information about people's experiences and how events unfolded. Personal recounts are written from the point of view of the writer in first-person perspective. For this reason, they're often lacking a certain drama, because you know that if they were written, that the person who wrote them survived the account. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been written in the first place. So they do lack a certain drama, like prequels in that way. Prequels, they always start from the back foot, because you know that everybody involved in them survived, because you already know how the ending is going to happen. The writer's personal opinion is often included. That's something that you can always do with first-person perspective, as we looked at in narratives. In first person, I would say that in first person, you are always looking at an unreliable narrator. Always. The narrator is not someone you can absolutely trust. You shouldn't trust every single word that comes out of your narrator, because it's only an opinion. Watched a film this weekend called Fight Club. Fantastic movie, by the way. And we did a video on it, an analysis. And the whole film hinges on unreliable narrator. It hinges on the fact that right at the beginning we see this dramatic event, and then the story unfolds as he tells us how he got from where he was to where the movie started. So the rest of the movie is the past from his perspective, and he's unreliable because it tells you straight in the opening moments he's crazy. He's half asleep all the time, can't remember what happened, so none of this is absolutely trustworthy or reliable. And because of that, we're not supposed to take what he says as absolute fact. Okay? So all recounts are an unreliable narrator because they are one person's perspective. So you always have to bear that in mind. Characters can be portrayed in favourable or unfavourable ways. And again, saw this in Fight Club, among other stories, where some people are shown as heroic, some people as less heroic. Usually, an unreliable narrator will normally put themselves in a better than average light. They'll try and make themselves seem more heroic. The people that they dislike will be shown in the opposite way, obviously. Personal recounts can tend to be less objective than other forms of non-fiction writing. Well, that's another way of saying that, yeah, an unreliable narrator, we should not trust the narrator. Now, if I was to stretch that and say, now what else do we do in first-person perspective in terms of narration? Let's take the news. We absolutely shouldn't take it as fact. It's unreliable because it's only one person's perspective. Okay? American news especially has proved that time and time again. Personal recounts do differ from each other in form and type. Depending on the purpose of the recount and the audience, they may be formal or informal. It depends, yeah, Depends very much on what information you're giving. Look at TED Talks. You can get 2 TED Talks which are almost identical in format, and they'll be completely different depending on who's telling them and why. You could be hearing a recount on somebody telling you how they made a comedy film, and it'll be completely different in tone to somebody talking about a historical event, especially a dramatic historical event. So things are told depending on how they need to be told. Usually, all you need to remember is that somebody giving a recount is usually smart enough to understand their audience. That usually dictates the tone of a recount. The following are some examples of personal recounts. Personal diaries. I would argue that not many people read their diary. You could argue that lots of young people do these days. That's what TikTok and various other social media platforms are. People reading their diaries. Unimportant events done with the absolute minimum of clothing. Unfortunately, that's the world that we're turning into, where it's all about the surface narrative. Journals. Depending on the sort of journal, I would agree with this. A journal being kept of an important event normally would lack drama at the beginning, because you don't know that you're living through an important event until it happens. This would be something like the Diary of Anne Frank, where her journal was just a day-to-day account, and then she was hiding from the Nazi regime under pain of death, under fear of her life. So it became more and more dramatic as the story went on, where the family are coming to terms with the fact they're going to get caught at some point, and of course they are. So the story is quite dramatic as we wait for the end. Travel recounts. Now these are dramatic from the outset because the person is going travelling looking for some kind of adventure. So we know that some things happen, otherwise it wouldn't have been written. So this is the opposite of a dramatic story where someone was supposed to survive, because this person is saying this wouldn't even be out there if something hadn't happened. This is out there because it's interesting. Memoirs. Now we normally get these if somebody's lived an interesting life and people would want to read about it. Not as often as you might think this happens. We see this a lot on writing forums where people say, I'm going to write my memoirs because I once took drugs and I don't take drugs anymore, and I'm sure everyone wants to hear my story. And you'd be surprised how many thousands of people post that every week. Nobody cares that you once took drugs and now realise you shouldn't have taken drugs. Nobody cares, because it's been done to death. Nobody cares that you had mental health problems, because it's been done to death. We want to only read about something that is dramatically different or really breaks some new ground. It's been done. So you'd be surprised how many people want to write memoirs without establishing who they are as a person first. So for that reason, memoirs normally cover already famous people. Historical recounts. Often these will be partially imagined, I would say, where they represent a historical event, but maybe not 100% reliably. Biographies, very much like memoirs, only they're written as an official document, so they would be more formal. And autobiographies are self-written. The difference in a biography and an autobiography, because some people are hazy on this, an autobiography is written by the person it's about. A biography is written about somebody. Biographies tend to be slightly more reliable because it's not you, and if you're writing about yourself, you're going to pretend that you're the greatest person in the world. Biography is more honest, but there are official and unofficial biographies. Unofficial biographies tend to be more accurate because the person we're talking about isn't involved. But again, if it's somebody talking about a historical figure who is known to be evil or supposed to be evil, it won't be reliable. Unfortunately, that's just the world we live in. I mean, it's like Hitler. They're trying to ban people talking about Hitler. And these idiots are too stupid to realise that when we cover up history, we are dooming ourselves to repeat it. We should be talking about Hitler, just so that the things that happen don't happen again. We should be learning from history, not repeating it. But that's what it is. So we're going to have a look at a brief recount now as an example, and then we'll answer some questions about it. So I thought we'd look at a travel recount from from a very interesting traveller who did some amazing things and who's incredibly fun to listen to.